Ronald was only 8 when he first realized that the world could fall apart quietly. There was no storm that night, no angry voices echoing through the house, no shattered glass to mark the end of a family. Instead, it was the silence that hit him. The silence of two people who no longer looked at each other the same way. The silence of love slowly folding into something unfamiliar. He remembered sitting at the dinner table, tracing shapes on his plate with a fork as his mother and father exchanged carefully chosen words. They weren't arguing anymore, and somehow that felt worse. Because even at 8, Ronald could sense that the absence of conflict didn't mean peace. It meant distance. When the announcement finally came, "We're going to live in different homes," Ronald's world tilted. He nodded quietly as if he understood, but he didn't. How could a child grasp that two people who once promised forever were now rewriting that promise into separate stories? And here's the thing. Ronald isn't just one boy. He represents millions. Every year, countless children around the world grow up with parents who part ways. And while their situations may differ, the inner world of a child navigating divorce often echoes the same themes: emotional confusion, hidden questions, quiet struggles. The psychology of a child with divorced parents isn't a simple tale of brokenness. It's far more layered, filled with resilience, longing, and an unshakable search for belonging. Psychologists have studied the impact of divorce on children for decades, and the findings are striking. On average, children of separated parents are more likely to experience feelings of insecurity, anxiety, and divided loyalty. But statistics alone can't capture the trembling heartbeat of a child like Ronald, lying awake at night wondering if he will have to choose sides, or if love itself comes with an expiration date. Let's step into Ronald's shoes for a moment. Picture him packing his school bag on a Friday evening, knowing he'll spend the weekend at his father's house. Inside that small backpack, there's more than homework and a toothbrush. There's the invisible weight of two worlds that no longer touch. He wonders, should I tell Dad that Mom bought me a new sweater? Should I tell Mom that Dad made my favorite pancakes? Even at such a young age, he's already learning to edit himself, to filter his joy, so it doesn't turn into someone else's pain. This silent negotiation inside a child's mind is what psychologists call a loyalty conflict, a tug-of-war between wanting to love both parents freely and fearing that showing affection to one might hurt the other. And the truth is, children rarely say these things out loud. They carry them quietly, like a secret weight pressing against their small shoulders. Ronald grew older. By 12, he had become an expert at reading the emotional weather in each home. At his mother's place, he learned to tread carefully, not to mention his father, unless the moment felt safe. At his father's, he sometimes exaggerated how well he was doing in school, hoping it might ease the guilt his dad seemed to carry for not being there every day. And here's where the psychology deepens. Studies show that children of divorce often develop a heightened sensitivity to emotional cues. They become watchers, listeners, interpreters of sighs and silences. While this can make them more empathetic and emotionally intelligent in time, it can also plant the seeds of hypervigilance. Imagine growing up believing that peace is fragile, that love is conditional, that stability can vanish overnight. It shapes not just how you see your parents, but how you come to see yourself. But here's the paradox. Many children of divorce also grow up to be remarkably resilient adults. Why? Because the cracks in their childhood force them to develop adaptability. They learn how to navigate complexity, how to live between two realities, how to hold contradictions without breaking. Ronald, for example, became the kind of teenager who could comfort a friend with uncanny wisdom because he knew firsthand what it felt like to hold unspoken pain. Still, resilience doesn't erase the questions that linger. Children like Ronald often wrestle with the idea of permanence in relationships. They may wonder, if my parents couldn't make it, will I ever find something that lasts? These questions don't always appear immediately. Sometimes they lie dormant for years, waiting until young adulthood, when Ronald sits across from someone he loves and suddenly feels a quiet fear of history repeating itself. And yet, this is where psychology offers hope. Research shows that awareness can break cycles. Children who grow up in divorced homes are not destined to repeat the same patterns. In fact, many of them, once they process and understand their past, become deeply committed to building stable, healthy relationships of their own. They know the value of communication. They know the cost of silence. And they know that love, to survive, must be nurtured, not assumed. But let's not rush too far ahead. Let's go back to Ronald as a child, because this is where the true story of psychology begins. He often wondered, did I cause this? That's another common pattern, children blaming themselves. Developmental psychologists note that younger children, especially under 10, often internalize divorce as something they somehow caused. Maybe they misbehaved. Maybe they fought with their siblings. Maybe they just weren't good enough. These thoughts aren't logical, but they are painfully real. Ronald carried this question quietly for years, until one day, as a teenager, he finally said it aloud to a school counselor. The counselor explained something, simple yet profound. You didn't break your family. You were caught in a change you couldn't control. That moment stayed with Ronald. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from someone naming the truth you couldn't name yourself. Here's what makes this topic so deeply human. You don't have to be a child of divorce to understand it. All of us, in some way, have felt the sting of separation, whether it's the loss of a friendship, the fading of a dream, or the drifting apart of people we once held close. Ronald's story is a mirror. It shows us how deeply children long for connection, and how fragile they feel when that connection is threatened. At the heart of this psychology lies a paradox. Children of divorce are both wounded and wise. They know instability, yet they crave stability with a fierce intensity. They may grow up cautious, but that very caution can fuel a deeper understanding of what makes relationships work. And isn't that, in some way, the story of all of us? We are shaped not only by the love we receive, but also by the love we lose. Ronald's nights were sometimes heavy. He would lie in bed at his father's house, staring at the ceiling, wondering if his mother missed him. Then he'd return to his mother's place and wonder if his father felt lonely without him. This quiet sense of being split in two, of belonging everywhere and nowhere, is one of the most profound psychological burdens a child of divorce can carry. And yet, it can also become the seed of empathy, teaching them to imagine the inner lives of others. Psychology tells us that children like Ronald often become bridge builders. They learn to connect worlds that don't naturally align. They know how to soften conversations, how to ease tension, how to make peace where peace feels fragile. It's both a gift and a weight. Because while it makes them compassionate, it can also make them afraid of conflict, always trying to prevent the next rupture. But what if I told you that this very tendency, the longing to bridge divides, can be transformed? What if, instead of being a scar, it could become a source of strength? Here's where the story deepens. Because while divorce may mark a child, it does not define them. The psychology of a child of divorced parents is not a prophecy of brokenness. It's an invitation to resilience, to reflection, to rewriting the meaning of love itself. And that brings us back to Ronald. By the time he reached adulthood, he carried both wounds and wisdom. He had trust issues, yes, but he also had insight. He sometimes feared abandonment, but he also understood the preciousness of presence. And above all, he carried a quiet determination. If love is fragile, then I will treat it as something precious, not disposable. This is where the real story begins. Because the psychology of children like Ronald isn't just about what they endure, it's about what they create out of that endurance. Ronald once said something quietly to a friend, almost as if afraid of the words themselves. I feel like I belong everywhere and nowhere. That single sentence captures the essence of so many children, of divorced parents. They are children of two homes, yet sometimes it feels like they belong to none. Always packing, always moving, always balancing between worlds. And while adults may see this as a matter of logistics, drop-offs, pickups, schedules, for the child, it's something far deeper, far more symbolic. Home itself becomes a shifting idea. Psychologists call this dual identity strain, the tension of adapting to two environments, with different moods, rules, and sometimes even values. Ronald's father was strict about bedtime. His mother was more lenient. His father loved sports. His mother encouraged reading. To cope, Ronald became a chameleon, learning to adjust quickly. On the surface, it made him flexible. But inside, he often wondered, who am I really? Which version of me is the true one? This search for identity is one of the deepest psychological threads woven through the story of a divorced child. Because when stability is divided, the self can feel divided too. Yet here's the fascinating twist. Many children, through this very struggle, develop a stronger, more authentic identity as they grow older. They learn to blend the lessons of both worlds to draw strength from contrast. Think about it. A child who sees two perspectives, two ways of loving, two approaches to life's problems, develops a wider lens. Ronald learned discipline from his father and compassion from his mother. At first, it felt like contradiction. Later, it became integration. And that integration shaped the person he became. But it wasn't always easy. There were years when Ronald feared relationships altogether. He noticed how quickly small arguments between partners reminded him of his parents' quiet drift apart. Sometimes he left connections early, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. His psychology carried a quiet whisper, better to leave before they leave you. This too is common. Studies show that children of divorced parents are slightly more likely to fear commitment or struggle with trust in early adulthood. It's not that they don't want love, it's that they've seen how fragile it can be. Yet, as Ronald eventually learned, fragility does not mean futility. A glass may be fragile, but it can still hold water. Love may be vulnerable, but it can still endure when nurtured with awareness. So what does that awareness look like for Ronald? It began with noticing patterns. He realized he was always waiting for rejection, always testing people's patience just to see if they would stay. When he recognized this, he began to change. He realized that trust is not about guarantees. It's about choosing vulnerability, even when the outcome is uncertain. This is where psychology becomes philosophy. The child of divorce, who has seen promises break, often becomes the adult, who honors promises more deeply. But let's widen the lens beyond Ronald. What does research truly say about children like him? Psychologists have identified both risks and strengths. On the risk side, children of divorced parents may experience lower academic performance in the short term, higher chances of anxiety or self-doubt, and greater difficulty forming stable attachments. But on the strength side, they often develop remarkable empathy, problem-solving skills, and adaptability. Many even describe them as old souls, because they learn early that life is not black and white. Here's something powerful to remember. Resilience doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in the cracks, in the places where life challenges us to adapt. Ronald's cracks taught him to listen deeply, to notice when someone was hurting, even when they stayed silent. His own childhood silence trained him to hear what others couldn't say out loud. And yet, empathy alone wasn't enough. There came a time when Ronald had to face his own inner child, the boy who still wondered if he was somehow to blame. Therapy helped. Honest conversations helped. But most of all, time helped. Because as the years went on, Ronald discovered a truth that slowly dissolved his guilt. Divorce wasn't his story. It was the story of two adults trying to navigate their own imperfections. He wasn't the cause. He was the witness. That realization is critic. All the children who carry guilt often grow into adults who overcompensate, always trying to fix, to please, to prevent conflict at any cost. But when they finally understand that they were never responsible for their parents' choices, they find freedom, and freedom gives birth to authenticity. Ronald eventually fell in love, and yes, the old fears resurfaced. He worried about repeating history, about promises fading into silence. But this time, he did something different. Instead of hiding his fears, he spoke them. He told his partner about the nights he spent moving between homes, about the loyalty conflicts, about the questions that still lingered. And something beautiful happened. Instead of leaving, his partner listened. And in that listening, a new pattern began. That is perhaps the deepest gift children of divorce can offer the world. Honesty. They know the cost of silence, so they learn the value of truth. They know the weight of unresolved loops, so they become storytellers who seek closure. In a way, they embody what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where hardship, instead of breaking someone, deepens their capacity for meaning, connection, and purpose. Let's return one last time to the image of Ronald as a child, lying in bed, wondering if love lasts. That question never fully disappears, but maybe it changes shape. Maybe it shifts from, does love last forever? To, can I love fully while it lasts? And isn't that, in a way, the question for all of us? Whether our parents stayed together or not, whether our lives unfolded smoothly, or through fractures, we all carry the same longing to be loved and the same fear of losing it. Ronald's story is the story of fragility transforming into wisdom. It reminds us that a child of divorce is not defined by brokenness, but by the depth of their understanding. Yes, they may wrestle with doubts. Yes, they may carry scars, but those very scars can become maps, guides toward empathy, toward commitment, toward building the kind of love they once feared might not exist. And maybe that's the hidden gift inside the pain. Children of divorce often grow into adults who understand something profound. Love isn't guaranteed, and that's what makes it sacred. Stability isn't promised, and that's what makes it worth protecting. When they choose to love, they do so with the eyes wide open, not out of naive certainty, but out of conscious devotion. So when you think of Ronald, don't just picture the boy at the dinner table, confused by silence. Picture the man he became, the one who knows how precious presence is, who listens deeply, who commits not because it's easy, but because he knows what it means when commitment fades. The psychology of a child of divorce is not a tragedy. It's a lesson written in human hearts. It tells us that out of division can come unity, out of fragility can come strength, and out of silence can come a voice. And maybe, just maybe, children like Ronald remind all of us of a truth we sometimes forget. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing, again and again, even when it's fragile, especially when it's fragile.